We're about to start the Russo-Souhan Show. Just wanted to let everybody know that as we try to grow our network, downloads are becoming very important to us. If you could, when you listen to the show, download it instead of simply streaming it, that would help us out a lot. And usually downloading only requires one or two more clicks than listening. Myself and my co-hosts across the talknorth.com podcast network, thank you for that. I'm Jim Souhan, here to do the Russo-Souhan Show with a very depressed Michael Russo. He owns a condo in a really cool neighborhood in Minneapolis, and I just brought the housing prices crashing down by moving in with my very, what's the word, arrogant French bulldog. I don't think anybody's going to want to live here anymore.
Yeah, this is a beautiful place that you're living in here.
It actually is.
I should sell my condo and move here.
And the apartment is so big, I can cook dinner while taking a shower.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that. I was going over my Italy hotels today, and one of the hotels looks like, you're like in bed and then you can reach for the faucet on this side and, get dressed by putting your arm out that side. But it should be a fun trip.
Yeah. Yeah. Have fun with that. When are you going again?
July 8th or 9th. I can't remember.
Cool. Well, enjoy that.
Yep.
This is the Russo-Souhan Show. This is our hockey show on talknorth.com. Check out the website. Subscribe on iTunes. Subscribe to just this show or all the shows. Cheryl Reeve, The Flow. We're bringing your buddy Steven Strom.
Yeah. How's that going? So tell me about that.
Well, Steven is the guy who you befriended, who's a New Jersey college basketball player whose parents lived in Minnesota, so he always grew up identifying with Minnesota sports teams. I wrote a column about him. He's a cool guy, and he is going to do his own show on the network, and he might even be bringing us a sponsor. We'll be talking about that later. It takes a village, Michael. Yeah. And Steven is
on his radio show.
Steven's the loudest person in the village.
Yeah, he has a radio show in New Jersey, and I was on it a couple of weeks ago, and he does a great job. He has better questions than a lot of radio hosts.
Yeah, and not a high bar,
including yours truly.
Not a high bar, but he's good, and he's a aggressive young guy. It's going to be fun to work with Steven. I had a long talk with his dad today. So that we continue to grow the network thanks to Twill and the Edina Galleria, Fixology Repair, downtown and in the Mall of America, and Tony Hoagland, your State Farm agent in Champlin, HOAGLUND. If you'd like to sponsor the show, JSOUHAN47@gmail.com. Let's get to the news.
Breaking news. I got breaking news right now.
Let's hear it.
After 4 boys, number 5 for Luke and Angela Cahill, friend of the show, was a girl, Tressa.
Wow.
Was born. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Luke.
Yeah.
That doing live shows is sometimes logistically difficult, but the great thing is we got to know people. We really enjoyed having Luke around for those shows.
In fact, the person that texted me that is a friend of the show, Vicky.
Oh, Vicky, yeah. So at some point, somebody's going to be smart enough to have our live shows again and to have our audience showing up and drinking their beer. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it will happen. What's going on with the coaching staff?
Delicate situation, but Paul Fenton wanted to bring in somebody that he really knows and trusts and respects and bring him in. And obviously, as we've reported on and on and on, Craig Leopold has made it very clear that Bruce Boudreau is safe. So the next best thing is an assistant coach. And the next best thing from Paul Fenton's standpoint is one of the coaches was in the last year of his contract. So John Anderson is the odd guy out. And what makes that a delicate situation is this is Bruce Boudreau's best friend.
Mm-hmm.
This is somebody that he's known since their days with the Leafs and played together in Houston and all the way up and tons of stories. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, the good news is that the transition should be a little easier because Dean Evison is his name. Played 800 games in the National Hockey League. Played with Fenton with the Whalers organization and the San Jose Sharks. Was his coach for 6 years in Milwaukee. But before that, he was actually on a staff for 7 years with the Capitals, 5 of which Bruce Boudreau was there, and 3 of which Bob Woods, the other Wild assistant coach, was there. So there is a relationship there. They like each other. They respect each other. and now it's an oddity. And I know that a lot of fans are construing it like this is the beginning of Paul Fenton putting his guy right on the bench. But the fact that there has been a relationship before should make it a little less awkward. But obviously, Paul said that Bruce was on board today. When I talked to Bruce, he definitely gave the company line and said that he was on board with it, but he feels terrible for John Anderson, his friend. He says he's down in the dumps about it. Now they're going to have to work together.
Interesting. Remind me, how many years left on Bruce's contract?
2.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing going on right now. You have a GM that walks into the organization, and he's sort of forced to inherit the coach. Maybe he would have anyway. Now you have a coach that's sort of forced to take on a confidant of the GM. And then you have Brent Flair, the number 2 of the old GM, who could be on dire straits himself. It's going to be running the draft. I mean,
wow.
And it's just kind of a weird transition. And this is kind of what you get when Chuck Fletcher had all these guys in different stagnant contracts and gave everybody extensions. And it makes for, just one of those situations where you're going into the hockey season, you just know that there's all this kind of like inner drama here, and you just wonder if it's gonna, if they get off to a bad start, if all of a sudden it's going to be one of those issues you have to look back on. And
the problem for the incoming coach in this situation is that he may be viewed fairly or unfairly as the general manager's spy.
Yes, stool pigeon, as somebody called him today to me, but Bruce is just going to have to deal with it. He's worked with Dean before, and talking to Bruce, he genuinely likes him. But I would agree. I mean, that's the concern here, probably less so than even John Anderson being replaced. Is that that's going on? But here's the deal. I mean, every GM has his trusted people that you're around. This, as well as I do in professional sports. Loyalty is the biggest thing. You get off to a bad start, you have to know that the guy next to you is not putting a shiv in your back. And, I mean, we've seen it throughout the rest of time. I mean, Brian Murray had Brent Flair and Chuck Fletcher and got to know them in Florida, so when he goes to Anaheim, he brings them. When Brian Murray goes to Ottawa, he brings Brent Flair and Tim Murray. When Chuck Fletcher comes here, before Chuck was even hired, I was writing Brent Flair would be his right-hand man. And before Paul Fenton got here, I was writing that Jack Ferrara would be his right-hand man. And I can tell you that most likely Chuck Fletcher in his next job, when he takes one of, I'm sure, many pro scouting opportunities that he has to be, Chuck has opportunities right now that he's going to choose from, but he doesn't want to. His son's going into senior year of high school. He doesn't want to leave town in that year, so he's probably going to take a pro scouting job, and you've got to think right away the obvious choices would be working in Nashville with somebody he trusts, working in potentially New Jersey with somebody he trusts, things like that. I mean, that's just kind of the way it works. Working in, I mean, that's just how the way it works. So,
do you think assistant coaches in the NHL are more or less influential than assistant coaches in other sports?
Yes. Wait, ask the question again. Sorry, I was distracted by a text.
Do you think that assistant coaches in the NHL are more or less influential than other sports?
I look at football, and again, from a total layman's point of view, I mean, I see them as being incredibly influential. I mean, their name or their job, their title is not only coordinator, but what side of the ball they're on.
Right.
And in hockey, I do think that, look, it's a lot of times up to the players. If you have crappy players, you're not going to have a good power play, no matter who's coaching. And the assistant coach, specifically the one that Dean's taking over, doesn't call the forwards out. That's going to be Bruce that calls the forwards out. Bob Woods calls the D out. So I do think that it's less influential from that way. But similar, from a contrasting point of view, they're the ones that put the guys on the ice in certain situations. So when something happens on the ice in a real-time game, it's the coach that made the decision, and either good or bad. So I mean, it's kind of goes both ways. But what's going to be really interesting, and this is a funny story. I told Jason Piant I would tell it on the thing, and if you read between the lines of my story that ran in The Athletic today, you'll know this. Talking to Bruce, and I said, what is Dean going to do, the power play or the penalty kill? And he goes, well, he did the penalty kill in Washington, but I'm just going to have him take over John Anderson's spot and do the power play here. And so I said to him, well, why don't you have Woods do the power play and him do the penalty kill since Buffalo had the top power play in the league when Bob Woods was coaching that? And there was like silence for 5 seconds. He's like, that's a good question. So I think he went. So all of a sudden we come into camp next year and we see that Bob Woods is doing the power play. It's going to be because I asked him that question. It's good. So what he said is that he's meeting with them at pro meetings next week. He's going to meet with them and he's going to ask them, what do you guys want to do? And maybe Dean says, I would like to do the power play. Maybe Bob says, I'd like to do the penalty kill, but we'll see. But it'd be funny if that, like, my question, like, all of a sudden, like, because you remember when Bob Woods came here, the only reason why he didn't put Bob on the power play was because John coached it the year before and that power play was over 20%. So, so it probably, from Bruce's point of view, he kind of forgot that Bob coached that first-ranked power play in Buffalo.
More league news, more intrigue, the finals, and Twitter questions coming up on the Russo-Souhan Show. Again, check out all the shows at talknorth.com, and thanks to our primary sponsor, Twill in the Edina Galleria, twillmn.com, Twill on Instagram. And I played golf the other day in the Randy Shaver tournament, which was really well done. Raised about $370,000 for cancer research. Randy and his wife do an incredible job with that charity and that tournament. And I wore a golf shirt I bought at Twill. It's a Johnny O shirt. I bought Peter Millar shirts there. I really like the Johnny O line for casual wear. And that's the cool thing about Twill. People know it as a high-end men's clothing store, but you can buy golf shirts, you can buy socks. I bought underwear there recently, most comfortable underwear I've ever worn. Michael's getting really uncomfortable right now.
Too much information.
Check out Twill in the Edina Galleria. I can highly recommend it.
Hi, I'm Stacy Souhan. I love Twill. Scott Dayton's shop in the Edina Galleria. Twill takes the stress out of shopping by offering updated traditional fashion. I know that if Jim goes in there shopping alone, I will like what he buys, whether it's pajamas, flannel shirts, or suits. I plan to recommend Twill to my daughter when she has to buy wedding party gifts and attire. Twill in the Edina Galleria will bring your fashion game to a championship level.
Should I ask boxers or briefs?
No, you shouldn't. We're not going to get into that. So what's going on with Jack Ferraro? What's going on with Garth Snow? What's going on with the Islanders?
Jack, I mean, what a beauty when you talk to that guy on the phone. He's just hilarious. And he's old school, man, turning 74 on Saturday. And who would have thought that, 30 seasons ago, he was the North Stars general manager. And, I heard somebody say today, I didn't even know he was still in the league, but he's been in the league the last 12 years, pretty much as Dean Lombardi's special advisor in L.A. And then Rob Blake he got very marginalized this year. When Rob Blake took over, he only really retained Jack because he had a year left on his deal. Then he essentially stopped calling Jack, is the way I understand it. So when Fenton came here, this is his longtime mentor. I did a story a week or two ago on their relationship, and essentially what happened is when he was working for the Whalers as the assistant general manager back in the 80s, a rink manager, he said, at a local rink asked him to coach a summer league, and a 16-year-old named Paul Fenton and Dean Lombardi, who I think was either a year younger or older, was on that team. And Paul and him struck up a liking, and Paul became the best player on that team. And next thing you know, he helped him latch on to the Whalers. And then when he was here as the North Stars GM, the Guns sold the North Stars to Norm Green with the promise, remember, that they would get a franchise and expansion team in San Jose. The Guns brought him to San Jose to become the first manager there. Then he winds up in Anaheim. So he brings both Fenton and Evison, by the way, to San Jose for that expansion team. That was, by the way, horrendous. And then that ended Fenton's career. And Fenton tried to get a job at UMass Amherst, I believe it was, doesn't get it, and he goes to he calls Ferraro, who's now the GM for the expansion Ducks, and says, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't get this job. And he goes, well, come out here and work for me, and he basically scouted for him. So, it's it's his longtime mentor, and so now you have a guy that's gonna be his senior advisor. I mean, he is gonna be the trusted sounding board right now because, look, I talked to Fenton today, and Fenton's like, I don't know these guys, so I need to have somebody I'm familiar with and respect and the knowledge. And he said that right now he used the term whirlwinded. I'm whirlwinded right now with the amount of hectic stuff that I'm dealing with, and it's just nice to have this guy that's been there, done that can kind of calm me down at times. And so he's going to continue to live in California. but scout the West Coast, which I didn't realize the Wild Pro Scouting had a total void out there until recently. So he's going to scout that.